right, so let's try to tackle this challenge step by step. Now, if we look at the flowchart, the first question we ask is it cleanly divisible by 4? If no, then it's definitely not a leap year. If yes, then we have to ask more questions. So how would we write this in terms of code? Well, we'd probably use an if statement to check if the year that we're being passed in here is cleanly divisible by 4. And remember that on a previous lesson, which I linked to here, we learned about the modulo operator, which gives you the remainder of a division. So if the year modulo 4 is equal to 0, namely if there is no remainder when you divide the year by 4, well, in that case, then it's likely to be a leap year. But if it's not even divisible by 4, then it's definitely not a leap year. So here we could simply return not leap year. So any year that is not divisible by 4, then is definitely not a leap year. But if it is divisible by 4, we still have to check, is it cleanly divisible by 100? Because if no, then it's definitely a leap year. But if yes, then we have to check further. So the best way to represent that logic is to create another if statement inside this if statement. So it's already divisible by 4, but we have to check whether if it's divisible by 100. So if the year modulo 100 is equal to 0, well then we have to make some further checks. But if it's not, then it's definitely a leap year. So we can return leap year. Now finally, we're in the home stretch and we have to ask ourselves the last question. Is it cleanly divisible by 400? If no, then it's not a leap year. If yes, then it is a leap year. So inside this if statement, we're going to ask ourselves one further question. If the year is divisible by 400 and that has no remainder, well then it's definitely a leap year. And if that's not true, then it's definitely not a leap year. So this is the logic that we saw in the flowchart mapped out with JavaScript code. And going from these words to code is actually quite a big jump. But going via that middle ground, that flowchart, makes it so much easier to actually map out the logic and then converting it into code. So I hope you enjoyed that challenge and you managed to get it right. And at least if you didn't, you saw how you can use flowcharts to simplify and clarify your own idea of the logic. Because at the end of the day, the code is easy, but the logic is the part that you got to get right first. So now if we check our solution, then everything should pass.